We're celebrating World Menopause Day, and today we'll be discussing why supporting an inclusive workplace that is menopause friendly can benefit your business and your staff. So that's the aim of the session.
Hi, my name's Natalie. I'm a registered nutritional therapist at GingerGreen Nutrition. I work with individuals with a whole range of health conditions, but my specialism and my focus is around women's health, particularly around perimenopause and menopause.
I'm Charmain Bucho. I'm Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion here at City and Guilds, and I'm also one of our executive coaches.
So, Charmain, why is it so important for employers today to actively support employees going through the menopause, and how does that impact the overall workplace wellbeing and diversity, do you think?
I think overall we know that employee wellbeing is so important, and menopause is part of a woman's journey, in the workplace. And so for us as an organisation, I think it's vital that we're mindful, that we're aware, and that we provide training and support for line managers and all staff in the workplace, so that as we're experiencing menopause, we can still perform at our best, and we're not under pressure or stressed to feel that we need to do more whilst experiencing the menopause as well. So it's really critical.
We know that 18% of the workforce is actually menopausal, so that's actually quite a high percentage. It's almost 1/5 of the workforce. So this is actually a sizable cohort of workers across all the employers in the UK. So Natalie, what's your thoughts on that question of why it's so important? Obviously, apart from the size of the workforce that is actually going through the menopause at the moment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if we think about, there's about 33 million people employed at any one time. 6 million of those individuals will be experiencing menopause and even perimenopause as well, which is the period leading up to menopause. And these individuals are at the peak of their career. They're extremely experienced. They've had a lot of training. They bring a lot of expertise, knowledge into the organisation. And when we consider that a huge amount of these individuals consider leaving work, actually leave work, go part-time, that's a huge impact on organisations. And so from a financial basis, organisations need to understand that that has a financial impact for them. And then replacing those individuals, if they do decide to leave work, is another financial implication. And then you've got other individuals within the workplace that need to step up and support that individual until they become, fully on board, etc., and the training involved. So even if you just look at the sort of financial side of it as an organisation, there's that element that you need to consider, as well as then being a good employer, supporting those individuals, because it is a huge transition for women, individuals at this point of life. And so to help support them in any way they can to do their best, because that's all anyone wants to do. They want to do their best at work. And so we need to give them the support and the ability to be able to be their best as they go through this phase that can last quite a long time. And I know we're going to talk about misconceptions about the menopause, because I think that's really important for people to understand.
Yes, I think some of the misconceptions out there are huge. And I think also that item that you flagged about how many people actually consider quitting, and actually how many people do quit. And I looked up some statistics actually before we started this menopause, and 1 in 4 actually consider quitting. And I freely admit actually that when I was going through perimenopause in the run-up, there were times when I came into the office and I was working in the office and I thought, what on earth am I doing? Why am I doing this? It's just so hard. It's too difficult. I can't cope anymore. And I'd always been a person that copes. And I know that there are loads and loads of ladies and other people out there that deal with menopause that have coped all the way through their life and been extraordinarily successful, and then suddenly reach that period of perimenopause when they really don't feel they can cope. And so 1 in 10 actually do quit. And the financial cost for employers and the loss of talent in the workforce is actually, that's really worth thinking about and really worth doing something about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to understand that it's not just women as they hit that average age that is always quoted out there of 51 and they have a few hot flushes and then it's all over, because my goodness, it is not. And for anyone that hasn't had any training and doesn't fully understand, what we're looking at here is, yes, it's a natural transition for women. Every single person born with a female reproductive system will go through the menopause. And whilst it's completely natural, that doesn't mean to say that it's an easy ride at all. And so what we're looking at here, menopause literally means the day that you've had 12 consecutive months without a period. Every day thereafter, technically you're post-menopause, but you're still menopausal in the sense that you no longer have periods. However, the time leading up to that day, if you like, that 12 consecutive months, is a transition phase. And that's called the perimenopause. And this is where we get these huge fluctuations of the hormones before they sort of begin to tail off a little bit. And so it's this fluctuating period that a lot of women don't really understand what's going on. And that can start from your 40s. And so I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that individuals may start to experience these symptoms as early as their 40s, possibly even late 30s for some. And that's a long transition time. If you then think the average age is 51, where you then are diagnosed, if you like, as being menopausal. But then the symptoms don't necessarily stop then. The point is that whilst then the hormones are sort of, have tailed off, we're still producing them, but in much lower numbers. And so symptoms do tend to get lesser and lesser as we sort of age, but that isn't necessarily true for everybody. And it's not an overnight thing. And so I think to understand that there is this huge period of time that can be 10 years, could be even longer for some women, not all women, but for some women, then you begin to understand the impact. Then you begin to understand that at this point in life, if you're sort of in your 40s, height of your career, you could be going into board meetings, you could be having client-facing meetings, and you could be getting all of these symptoms, that actually that's a huge impact for women.
Yeah.
And so if we just consider hot flushes, only because that's the one that gets bandied around quite a lot, it's not the most typical symptom. Not every woman will get hot flushes, but if you consider those hot flushes and you're in a board meeting, or you're in a client-facing meeting, you're doing a presentation, and you feel that heat rise through your body, you feel your neck going red, you feel your face going red, your glasses steam up, suddenly it's like an internal furnace going on. That's really embarrassing. That's really debilitating. And if we don't talk about it and we don't understand it, then for those individual women, you can see why they might end up leaving their jobs. They just feel they're not able to do that. If you've got a woman having night sweat, so we're not just talking about in the summer months, not this summer, obviously in the UK, but in previous summers, we have been quite hot at night. This isn't just talking about that. This is where you are waking up several times a night. You are waking up, you are soaked. If you're wearing pajamas or any nightwear, it is soaked. Your bed sheets are soaking wet. You have to wake up. You have to change those bed sheets. If that's happening to you several times a night, imagine that impact on your sleep. Imagine then the next day when you're coming in and you're trying to focus for your job, the brain fog, the sort of anxiety that then comes from that, this sheer exhaustion and fatigue. That's just two symptoms. There's endless others as well. So it is huge. And I think it's really important to understand that this isn't women just suddenly moaning about it. Women have been living like this for a long, long time. It's just the fact that we've been getting on with it quietly. We've been leaving work quietly. We've been putting up the symptoms quietly. We've been going part-time quietly. But we shouldn't be doing that. Nobody should be doing that. Nobody should be impacted by any health condition or any transition through life and having just to quietly put up with it, and then having this massive knock-on effect. And it's the socioeconomic side of it as well. If we consider all of these women, all of these individuals leaving the workplace, what then knock-on effect does that have on society in terms of financial impact for those individuals? So we could be talking all day about this. It is so wide-ranging in terms of not just for an employer, not just for the individual, but also from a socioeconomics, a societal point of view as well. It's wide-ranging. It's really huge.
It's enormous, isn't it? And you were saying that there are some misconceptions, including that one that, it's only really women in their late 40s and early 50s that are experiencing this. I know people that started their menopause in their mid 30s. So, and we've talked about the fact that one of the main misconceptions is just about hot flushes. And yet we know there are over 40 different symptoms. We've got a symptom checker on our City and Guilds menopause support website that lists over 40 different symptoms. And some of them are really unusual. So what are some of the common misconceptions employers and other employees and managers might have about menopause? Do you think, and how can these affect workplace culture?
Yeah, I think that's it. And I mean, the important thing also to recognise is that whilst we're talking about a natural menopause, so that's the sort of natural transition that we go through, is we're no longer fertile, if you like, because we're no longer requiring to have babies, etc. There are other types of menopause as well that it's important for individuals, managers and colleagues to understand. So we have the natural menopause that can happen for anyone sort of 40 onwards. If it's earlier than that, then we would consider it might be early menopause. And so it's important for individuals that are maybe younger than that to go and speak to their GPs, because actually it may be that you need some extra support, because if you're going to go through menopause early, there is a knock-on impact of that from a health perspective. So it is important not to just think, if you're in your late 30s, oh yeah, this is menopause. I would recommend that you go and speak to your GP if you're sort of younger than 40. There are other types of menopause, as I mentioned as well. So there's early menopause. That can happen to a woman at any age. So even women in their 20s may experience an early menopause. And obviously, as I say, they should go and speak to their GP about that. There's also surgical menopause. So if, for example, a woman has had a full hysterectomy, that's where you remove the ovaries as well, because the ovaries are where we produce those hormones, that will put a woman into instant menopause. Now, if she's over the age of 50, she may already be going through that transition anyway, so she may not notice some symptoms as much. But we do know that women still experience, because you're instantly putting a woman into menopause, that there's none of that sort of transition happening. But so then for younger women that go through a hysterectomy with their ovaries being removed, that is putting them straight into menopause. And more often than not, I'm not a GP, I'm not a medical doctor, but obviously what does tend to happen then is that a woman is normally prescribed HRT in order to replace those hormones that she would be losing, because she's going to be at a much younger age, and therefore she's obviously at greater risk. There's obviously then, so that's surgical menopause. There's also then chemical menopause. So that might be where an individual has had some cancer treatment, for example, and they may be on certain medications that are blocking their hormones. It may be, so for example, estrogen-related breast cancer. And so their hormones are being blocked. And so again, that can lead to a lot of these symptoms as a side effect of those sort of chemicals, if you like. And some women might be on hormone treatment for sort of cancers for anywhere up to 10 years. So again, it's recognizing the fact that if you have a woman who's young coming to you and talking to you or talking about these symptoms, that you don't dismiss her, because it is important to recognize that we don't all just look like me, 52-year-old women that are sort of going through that. There could be younger women as well, and there could be a range of different reasons why she might be experiencing those symptoms. So again, I think that's a misconception as well, that there are, other types of menopause as well, if you like, or at least situations that lead to menopause type symptoms. So I think that's a key thing for individuals to understand as well.
There's something else in there about those common misconceptions, because we were saying about the fact that everybody knows about the hot flushes. It's the one that's talked about most. But actually, we have as you know, Natalie and Charmain, we have a menopause group inside City and Guilds that we started 3 or 4 years ago by a group of ladies that were all facing some of these symptoms. But the main symptoms that affected our over 100 members was actually the anxiety. And that's actually probably one of the more challenging symptoms, because that anxiety when you're at work, and it can hit really hard, can be a really difficult thing to manage, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the anxiety that if you've always experienced anxiety, what you may find is that it suddenly gets worse around this time. If you've never really experienced it, Oh my goodness, it's a shocker. I will always remember the first time I noticed that I was getting any kind of anxiety. I was driving. I live in London, use the car from time to time. And I was getting really anxious about where I was going to park. I was going to meet a friend. And it was so stupid, and it sounds really, really trivial, but I started to get really anxious. I started to get a bit sweaty. I started to really get worked up about it. And I'd never thought twice about that sort of thing before. And if we just consider that's one tiny little example. And so for other women in the workplace, that's going to be a multiplied 10 times over and more. And it could be about really simple little things about being late, your IT work, going into the office, we're back into this sort of hybrid working, trains being late, transport being late, and. That anxiety slowly creeps up on you, and it comes from nowhere. And so it's really important that women are able to talk about it. They're able to get the right support that they need in order to deal with that. And there are lots of different things that women can do. I mean, certainly they need to go and talk to their healthcare professionals, but there's things like CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. There is also other types of therapies as well. So it's really understanding that there are lots of different things out there for women. It's not just this whole idea of you either take medication, i.e. HRT, or there's nothing for you. That is not the case. There's lots of things out there that have been evidenced to work. So I think it's important that women know what's available and they feel comfortable going to get that support. And within a workplace, we have those conversations so that we learn from other people's experience. And we're learning all the time. The evidence is coming out more and more. There's more studies being done. And so it's really important that we share that between ourselves and within workplaces as well, so that we can signpost people to where they can get that support.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in the early days of our support group that we started inside City and Guilds, and we were talking to some of the ladies here that were experiencing anxiety, and one of them was speaking about the fact that she does a lot of public facing and a lot of customer meetings, and the social anxiety that she was experiencing was enormous. And before every single meeting, or before every single event, or every single sort of webinar or public speaking session that she did, she was literally crippled by the social anxiety that she was facing, and found herself on several occasions like hiding in the toilets, literally, to get away from what she knew she was going to have to do. So, I mean, Charmain, from a practical point of view, what steps can employers take to create a more supportive environment for employees experiencing menopause? Because we know all of this is going on across all of the employers, and there'll be plenty of people out there that are experiencing that social anxiety, as well as some of those other 40 symptoms that we know about. So what steps can an employer take in terms of policy and everyday practices to support this?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to highlight, as Natalie said, is that this is a journey and everybody will experience it in different ways. So the symptoms will be varied and different. The time span will be varied and different, and it will show up in different ways. And I think that we're not just one identity. So in our support group, we know that we have people that are going through the menopause that are neurodiverse, who also experience anxiety, etc. And they've got strategies and coping methods in place that tend not to work at those times. So I think it's being aware that different people experience it in very different ways, and there may be other things layered into that can kind of mean that people are having to develop different strategies and different methods to cope. From a workplace, I think it's the first and most important thing is that managers and colleagues are confident and comfortable in talking about the menopause and having those conversations, and as an employee not having to hide and to mask the fact that you're having hot flushes, and it's okay to talk about it and to normalise it and not dismiss it. So I think that's the first thing. So very much the awareness, training and open conversations about it, because we know that it happens. And I think when it comes to the training for leaders and managers, we know that time moves on, things change. So being really, really supportive. The signposting, we've got health packages and support. We've got our employee assistance program that we can direct people to. So we're not saying that line managers and leaders have to be experts, but they know to know enough about it to be able to have the conversation, be empathetic and supportive, and then be able to signpost. And I think for organisations, that's that flexibility. We're in a hybrid working world, and being really supportive and allowing people to work very flexibly, to be able to attend relevant appointments that they might need to go to, and making sort of reasonable adjustments as well, because for some people it may be that they need different equipment now, or sitting for long periods of time can be a challenge. So other symptoms can kind of come up and throw up that probably weren't there beforehand. I think the kind of time off as well is important. And I know that we're looking at people being able to record time off sick, but as menopause, not other related sickness. And I think that's really, really important to say that, it's normalised and we understand it. And I think that we also offer within City and Guilds coaching program for all employees. And often it's supporting the individual because they're going through an experience that's new to them. And then they're having to try and explain that to leaders and line managers, and having that support and safe space to kind of have conversations and share how it's coming up in their work and what strategies they can put in place to kind of take a bit of ownership, I think is also really important. So those are the kind of things that I think are really key for organisations to consider as well.
So it's really having a menopause policy that everyone's consulted on and has taken has had an opportunity to feed into about what's needed and what's not needed, isn't it? I mean, I remember the early days when we were having more open conversations, because at the time when we started all this inside City and Guilds and we started Empowered, which is our own community support group, menopause was not spoken about. It was very much a sort of under the carpet type conversation that we were having quietly in corners, and we're much more open about it now. But I also remember the early days when we did start talking about it, and I raised it with a manager of mine who happened to be male, and I saw the mild look of panic on his face of, oh my God, I've got to deal with this, and I really don't know how to deal with it or what to say and what to do. And so I think having that policy that everybody knows about and everybody has been required to read, and also some training for managers is really key, isn't it? So that it does become normalised, because I think the more we talk about it and the more normalised it is, the less people panic and the less people start to think, oh my God, I've got to deal with this and I really don't know what I'm doing or what I should be doing, or I've got to have a really, really complex conversation about something I don't understand, whereas that's probably not necessary. It's as you say, Charmaine, it's being empathetic and being able to signpost. That's the most important thing for managers. They don't have to be experts, but they have to have enough knowledge and be empathetic, and they have to signpost.
Yeah, and that's why the menopause policy that we've created is really supportive, so that everybody can have a look at it. They get to understand what it means for City and Guilds, and what processes and approaches we take within the policy. So that's a really good guide and a really good starting point. So yeah, we're really pleased to launch that menopause policy, and we're working towards menopause friendly accreditation as well. And I think that really highlights our commitment to our female employees in the organisation.
One thing that I really like that City and Guilds have done, and the same with a number of other organisations that I work with as well, is this kind of wraparound approach that you've taken to menopause. So you haven't just decided to have this standalone policy, which I think is a bit of a mistake that a lot of organisations make. They sort of think, oh, we've ticked that box, we've got a policy, it's kind of sat there. So if anyone comes to a manager, we kind of know where to kind of look. And I think that's you've put a lot of work into a policy, but then it's kind of like, well, really, in a way, the policy is the end point. To some extent, ideally, if you never have to put that policy into place, that would be great. So in a way, what you've done at City and Guilds is you've sort of taken this wraparound approach. You've taken a sort of menopause toolkit, which is what I talk to women, individuals about having, that everyone's toolkit is going to be different. So every organisation is going to have a different menopause toolkit. But what you've put in your toolkit, you've got this policy, which is great, which is kind of the end point. But you've also then looked, how do we support women? How do we support individuals within the workplace to maybe make their transition easier and support them, so that maybe we never need to tap into that menopause policy. Maybe we never need to give them time off, because actually their symptoms have improved, their quality of life's improved, they're doing better at work, and actually the frequency we have to tap into that policy is getting less and less. And you've kind of done that by having your menopause champions. I know you have a lot of talks. You've got senior leaders that have been talking about menopause, and you've been also doing other sessions around coaching. You've had nutrition and lifestyle as well, which has helped support individuals. And I think that's a really great example to other organisations about what you can do right around this subject. So it's not just about having a policy or even guidance in place, because in a way, if women are still struggling at night, if they're still struggling with anxiety, if they're still getting hot flushes in meetings, that policy is there. Yes, you might give them some desk fans, you might give them time off, but you're not really dealing with helping them resolve some of those issues. They're still going to need that time off. They're still going to need some equipment. They still need to have whatever. But actually, if you can put other things into place to make this a much more well-rounded toolkit, then actually you're going to get a lot more out of it. And that investment that you're making is going to just be much more successful. And that's what I really like that City and Guilds have done. You really have done this kind of wraparound approach. And I think that accreditation, when you get it, will help represent that as well.
Yeah, well, you were right in there at the beginning with that, because in the early stages, when we first started talking about having a menopause support group, and Kirsty, who's our CEO, was like, my God, yes, please, let's do that, because we really need it and I need it. It's what role can leadership and management play in normalising it? And it was actually... You were really incredible, because you were flagged as being an opportunity to come in and do a workshop on nutrition, and that was something that we hadn't even really considered as a business that might actually be a really key part of improving people's menopause journey. And I think actually that role that leadership and management take at looking at that more rounded, that more sort of enveloping approach to menopause, and making sure that it's not just about having a policy in place, was really key. So, I mean, from the point of view of sort of leadership and management, how important is it, do you think, that you've got a really strong leadership influence and approach when it comes to supporting menopause?
Oh, totally. I mean, if you see someone represented at a leadership level within your organisation, that just filters down. You will find that people feel so much more comfortable talking about things. If you're not getting that, if it's all hushed up, then actually how can you expect other individuals to talk about it? And what we need to remember is that it's not just leaders, female leaders, that will be experiencing this. We have male leaders as well who are struggling with a partner at home, or, you know, somebody in their life that's going through it, and they don't know how to support them. So it's all very, you know, we're talking about individuals that are physically going through the perimenopause and menopause themselves, but we need to involve men in this conversation as well, because they are also struggling. They will have, you know, sisters, they will have partners, they will have wives, they will have colleagues in the workplace, they have women, they are surrounded by women everywhere. You know, we are everywhere. Men are impacted by this. So we need to involve them in the conversation as well. So it's not just about female leaders talking about their own personal experiences of, you know, how it's impacting their daily life. It's about involving men in the conversation. How are they struggling with it? What's the difficulties for them? What is it they would like to know? And in that way, if we're having a conversation with everybody, we are much better placed to deal with this and know what kind of support we need to be putting in place, not just for individuals transitioning the perimenopause and menopause, but those individuals that are having to support them as well. It must be really frustrating, as a man, to have a partner, someone you love, and watch them go through this, watch them struggling, watch them having that anxiety that your sleep's going to be disturbed. If they're having hot sweats at night, your sleep's going to be disturbed as well. But watching somebody really struggle going through this phase and just not knowing what to do about it. So I think leadership, involving anyone within the leadership to have this open conversation is just a win-win. I mean, there's nothing to lose from that whatsoever. And I think it's really, really key. And if you can do that as an organisation, then I think you're well on your way to really developing a great sort of menopause toolkit, as I call it, within your workplace.
Yeah, I remember in the early days, this was something that we hadn't considered as a group. We were all ladies of a certain age were thinking about ourselves. But as the group progressed, I remember talking to various individuals who were saying, actually, my family's really struggling with this, because when I'm at home, I'm not myself. I'm certain, I'm more snappy, I'm more bad-tempered, I'm more irritable because of the anxiety and the various issues that I'm dealing with. The fact that I've got constant insomnia from the hot flushes, so I'm not sleeping, my husband's not sleeping, and actually it's affecting my marriage, and it's affecting my children, who are suddenly looking at me as a parent and going, what's wrong with mum? She's always been really placid and easygoing, and suddenly she's not. And so we actually had a couple of male colleagues who approached us and said it would be really great if we had some better understanding of how we can support our partners, because it is affecting us, and it's affecting our sleep, and it's affecting our lives, and it's affecting our children. And you don't think about that wider aspect of menopause. It's been so concentrated in the female space. But actually, if you are a female in a family, it affects the whole broader family as well, and what's going on with them. And it can definitely affect children. And that's definitely something that nobody would want to see. So that's something we're looking at the moment is, what can we actually do to support families better? And what resources can we put out or put on our website, because we've got the menopause support website, that would actually be suitable for families and suitable for the wider business to be able to access as well.
I think that's a great consideration. And I think what we need to remember is that women now, generally speaking, are still the main carers. So if we look at women within the workplace, we're transitioning that phase at a key part of our career. We may still have teenagers at home, or we may have children that have gone off to university and come back home again. And so you've got that transition sort of going on. We've also got aging parents. And generally speaking, we know from the studies that most women are involved in the care of elderly parents, whether they're your own or in-laws as well. So you've got that side of it. So women are having to juggle an awful lot. And so that extra strain and pressure as well is having an impact. And if we consider for partners as well, if the woman in the family is doing all of that, but they're not coping very well, and they're having all of these symptoms that's having a knock-on effect, and they're not being, we all know that we've been through this. We all know that at times we're not very nice people, because we're just either got that rage, we've got that mist that comes down, and the things that you used to be able to cope with or put up with, one might argue, well, maybe you should never have done it, but you turn a blind eye, you put up with things, you keep the peace, all of that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, you're not that person anymore, because you're just thinking, why the hell should I? Because you've got all this other stuff going on. But actually, that does have an impact on wider families. And again, it comes back to society as well. All of a sudden, if we've got women that aren't able to do all of that kind of non-paid care, and let's remember, most of the care that women provide outside of their daily life is non-paid, then actually that has a massive impact. And so all of a sudden we can see that this sort of, so say, natural transition does have much wider impact across, the whole of society, the workplace, families, etc. And we do know that there are an increased cases of marriage breakdowns at this point in life. And what a shame. I mean, so many of those marriages could have been saved if women knew what was happening and got the right support. Men knew how to support their loved one and help them transition. But a lot of this comes back to communication. And that's the key thing. Yes, we do need to have lots of support in place as well, but we do have to talk about it. We've got to have that communication in the same way that mental health is now being, broken down in terms of the fact we're much more aware of what it is, what it involves. We're much more accepting of it. There's no longer that taboo around it. Menopause fits into that as well, because we know a lot of women struggle with their mental health as they go through this phase as well. So it's really important that we just break down these barriers and communicate and just have those really good conversations within the workplace, but outside as well.
Yeah. I still remember a few days when I came in during the sort of peak of the perimenopause, where virtually everybody who spoke to me was annoying. And at some point, so annoying, you were thinking, it would be really good if I could either just fire you, but I don't employ you, or if actually there were certainly days where I literally felt like the mad axe murderer in the office and was terrified that I might completely lose the plot and just explode at someone. And then came actually for some of us came lockdown. And I remember the enormous relief of lockdown. Everybody else was really sort of like, oh my God, lockdown's going to be awful. And there was me thinking, and quite a few of other ladies that were going through the menopause thinking, this is great. We don't have to deal with everybody in the office. We're not going to lose the plot and have a meltdown and do something that's going to get us fired. So, and I've speaking to many of the ladies in the group who have said, that they've come in from other organisations where actually they knew full well that they were probably having to move from that organisation because they had at some point during their perimenopause literally had a meltdown in the office and thought, I can't continue to work here because that people are viewing me completely differently. I need to get another job. And so they've actually left work, stayed off work for a period of time. And then when they've begun to feel better and more normal, when potentially they might have discovered HRT, because that can make a massive difference, they've then gone for another job and felt safe to go back into the workplace. And it's like you say, that loss of that talent during that period of time, and some people never go back to the workplace, is really key.
And I think also with City and Guilds, I think in that way, that is another representation of what a whole round approach you have to menopause, because actually we know that the marketplace is very competitive, and individuals are looking for employers that really support and really understand health and well-being, not just pay it a bit of lip service by having a bit of policy in place, but really paying attention to it. And actually you will then find that you are able to recruit better employees. You will be there as an organisation that people will actively seek out because they know that you really pay attention to those sorts of things. So in a way, the very fact that people have left other organisations and want to come and work for City and Guild also demonstrates the fact that they know that you're a caring organisation. They know that you have the things in place and you're going to be supportive of them on that journey as they transition, which is really, really important. And I think you're right. As we sort of go through this phase, I recognise with a lot of clients that I work with, this kind of wanting to shift a little bit, come away from the kind of going out, want to be a bit more nurturing at home. And I think that's where lockdown did help quite a lot of women, because actually, rather than running, we call it sort of busy women syndrome. It's where women sort of always through life, we're always busy. They always say, if you want something doing well, give it to a busy woman, because basically she'll get it done. And we pride ourselves on multitasking. We pride ourselves on juggling everything, and we're busy, and, it's almost like a badge to wear. And actually, as we go through perimenopause and menopause, we really need to begin to nurture ourselves. And this is where women, often they could be doing the right things in terms of diet. They could be on HRT. They could be doing all sorts of things. But actually that nurturing side, recognizing this transition, you need to be taking care of yourself. You need to be changing certain things that you're doing the full-on kind of HIIT training because you're worried about your weight is no longer working for you. You need to be doing other things. And I think that's where maybe lockdown helped a little bit, because we weren't having to do those 101 things that we used to do, because you couldn't, let's face it. I mean, it seems hard to remember now, but there was just so much that we couldn't do, that actually I think that really helped a lot of women to sort of slow down, be a bit more nurturing, looking after themselves a little bit more, as well as not having to do the 100 miles an hour kind of lifestyle as well. So I kind of recognise that too.
Yeah. I mean, there were lots of things that we put in place and lots of things that we had in the early days, and all of those resources are still available on our website. And I mean, having a good selection of resources for staff to be able to access that are easily available is really key. But when we've mentioned HRT, and HRT is great, and it does work for some, but it's not obviously available for everybody for a variety of different health reasons, and everybody's journey is absolutely different. But we've spoken and mentioned that there are other sort of, approaches and things that you can do that can make a difference and can make your menopause journey more comfortable. Can we talk a little bit about those? Because that's one of your specialisms, and that's one of the things that you do. What other things can women and can companies put in place that can support people going through the menopause?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing as an organisation or as an individual is to ensure you have the nice guidelines on your internal intranet, wherever you might have all your information, or as an individual woman, know what the nice guidelines say about, firstly, diagnosis. Because obviously if you're a certain age and you want to go to your GP and say you think you're perimenopausal or menopausal and you want testing, there will not be testing available, because what they will do is they will look at your age, they will look at your symptoms, and then they will say, well, technically you are. There's no point in us doing a blood test, because actually your hormones are fluctuating so much that we could take it and they could be normal. We could take them later on this afternoon or tomorrow. They could be sky high or they could be low. So it's really understanding what is the diagnosis of perimenopause and menopause. So that's the first thing. Then looking at what are the options. So historically, women might have been prescribed things like antidepressants. We know now that is no longer the first line of medication for individuals. So then it's looking at HRT. And when I talk about a menopause toolkit, what we need to remember is, you've already rightly said, every woman's experience will be different. So we can have lots of conversations, you can find out what your friends are doing, but that might not be the right thing for you. So some women will be lucky enough that they don't even really know that they've hit menopause. They just suddenly wake up one day and think, gosh, when was the last time I had a period? And they've transitioned it really well, really nicely. Some women will get some horrendous symptoms, really, really debilitating symptoms. And then there will be other women, most of us will be somewhere in between that. Most of us will not be lucky enough to just transition it really easily. Most of us will get some symptoms. They may be horrendous at some points. They may not be at other points, but we will all be on that spectrum somewhere. So it's really important to understand, what do you need within your toolkit? And what I would say is, regardless of which route you go down, for every single woman transitioning perimenopause and menopause, nutrition and lifestyle is a fundamental. So that is non-negotiable. That has to be an absolute starting point. You need to understand what is happening with your body. It's a very, very complex process. There's a lot of changes going on within our bodies. And so women really need to understand, it's not just about replacing the HRT and expecting everything to be okay. Because actually, for some women, they find that it doesn't make a difference, or they're encouraged to keep increasing the dosage. And again, there are formulations and there are guidelines around what that prescription might be. And so obviously, if you're just having to increase it all the time and you're not getting any relief, then we need to understand what else is going on. Maybe there's some gut microbiome issues going on and your hormones are just not being detoxified, not being processed. You're not getting out of the body enough, and so you're getting these sort of fluctuations. So it's really understanding what's going on in the body, getting nutrition and lifestyle, absolutely key. Then we layer on top of that, what else do you need within that toolkit as an individual? So for some women, that will be enough. Nutrition and lifestyle will be enough. For other women, they may need some support in terms of cognitive behavioural therapy. So these are sort of talking therapies that can help you with a whole range of symptoms, particularly things like anxiety, for example. They are available on the NHS. If you look at the NICE guidelines and you look at what is available, cognitive behavioural therapy is one of those options available. There is also evidence around things like acupuncture, which again, for some women may be very, very useful. So it's looking at what are all the things that are available, starting off with the NICE guidelines, looking at, if you want to go to your GP and have a conversation about perimenopause and menopause, my number one thing that I would do, and if you're an organisation, is to have that available on your intranet or wherever you put all of your resources, have that available. So even if you're a male employee and you've got a partner at home that's struggling, you can print those off and take them home, talk through with your partner, tick off the issues that you've got, what's relevant to you, even look at what's available. And then when you go to your GP, if you want to have that conversation, you are much more informed. You will save time within that consultation. We all know that GPs are really busy. We all know we don't have as much time as we would like with a GP, but you're going to save time. You're going to make it so much easier for that GP to have a conversation with you about where they think you are on that kind of timeline of perimenopause and menopause, what they think might be best for you. If it's HRT you want to have the conversation about, there's various different formulations. And so that's another thing to understand as an individual, is the fact that it's not a one size fits all. Even with HRT medication, there are different formulations and there is also different dosage. And depending on whether you have had a surgical menopause, whether you have had a hysterectomy but your ovaries are still in place, whether you're got a family history of things. Again, all of this will depend whether you're progesterone sensitive. So some women are very sensitive to progesterone. There may be different formulations. So just because your friend may be taking something doesn't mean to say that that's exactly right for you. And again, that's a really important to understand and to have that conversation as well. So I think there's lots of things that we can do as individuals. And I think for women as well, it's really understanding that this is a time in your life that you really need to make some changes. You cannot continue as you were in your 20s and your 30s and possibly even early 40s. It's a real transition period that you have got to work a lot harder at, unfortunately, in terms of that lifestyle. You can no longer be looking at your phones, your computer screens at 9, 10 o'clock at night and expect to get a good night's sleep. You have to work so much harder at getting that quality sleep so that you feel better the next day. So you're less likely to have those hot flushes the next day, and less likely to crave all those sort of sweet foods that we know we end up wanting more of as we transition this phase, and the change and fluctuations in hormones, etc. So I think as employers, it's also looking at what other organizations are out there. So, and providing those links. So for example, if for women that are maybe going through an early menopause, there's charities like the Daisy Network that provide some really useful information. So if I was an employer, I would be looking at almost trying to provide a one-stop shop for my employees, to make it as easy as possible for men and for women within that organisation, and providing as much information. You're not supposed to be the expert, by the way, but it's just making it easier. And if you've got that policy there, then why not provide those other links as well to organisations that can be really supportive for your colleagues and your employees?
I think that's really key, isn't it? And we've talked about this before, I know, but I think it is that work that an employer does to help employees educate themselves. So it's the employer enabling the employee or the woman to educate themselves. And in the early days, we talked about educating yourself before going to your GP, because actually we know that GPs don't get any specific menopause training at the moment. We're hoping that it might come at some point in the future, but most GPs don't have specific menopause training. And certainly in the early days of the menopause revolution, back in the early 2020s, you would go to GPs, and the first time I went to my GP, I'd done so much reading, I actually knew more than she did, which was a bit of a concern. But so it's employers enabling their employees to educate themselves, whether that's the males because they're educating themselves to support the family and their partner, or whether it's the individual going through the menopause to educate themselves so they can have that really intelligent and informed conversation with their GP and know what they need and know what they want, and therefore for the GP be able to help them in a way that's going to make a real difference to them. It's that educating yourself aspect of it as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if I was a woman wanting to go to talk to my GP, or a male that wanted to help support their partner going to the GP, then when you phone the GP surgery, I would always ask for, do they have a menopause expert? Do they have someone that's had additional training in the menopause? Find out who that person is and ask to have an appointment with them. Yeah. Don't just go to any GP. Now, you may not be that lucky. You may have a surgery where, nobody has had additional training. I think that's less likely these days. I think more and more surgeries, more and more, even if not every GP has had training, you will normally find in each surgery there is one person who has done at least some additional training. And as I said, that's the important thing with the NICE guidelines. So if you have a resistant GP that isn't willing to sort of acknowledge your symptoms and how debilitating they are for you, ask to speak to another GP. And the whole point of having those NICE guidelines is that you can sort of hold them up and say, look, I know that antidepressants are not the first line of defense, if you like. I know they're not the first line of prescriptions. I want to have an open conversation about HRT or whatever else it might be, cognitive behavioral therapy, etc. The other thing I also recommend is, and I've got it available on my website, and I think you've got access to it as well within City and Guilds, is a symptom tracker. And so what I would always say, whether you're a male with a partner at home, print this off, write down all of the symptoms you're struggling with, rate them on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever you want, as to how severe they are and how frequently they're impacting your life, how debilitating they are. Take that along with the NICE guidelines, and you can sit there and say, this is the impact it's having on my life. I can't manage, I'm shouting at the kids. I'm, at risk of falling out with my partner. I'm struggling at work, all of these things. And you've got the tracker there to show. What you don't want to do is go into that appointment, the GP say, oh, okay, well, look, I'll tell you what, go away for another month or so. Come back in a month's time, see how you're feeling. What you want to do is say, look, I've already done all of this. I can show you how difficult my life is at the moment. I want to have an open conversation. And obviously, if that GP isn't able to help you, then you seek out another one. You have every right to go and find other GPs that will help support you with your needs. And if a GP, for any reason, says to you, look, I know you may want HRT, but I think it's a real risk for you because of X, Y, and Z. That's still a risk. Obviously, I'm not a medical professional, but what we need to always work out with HRT is that, or any medication, nothing comes without risks. We seem to be in a very risk-averse state at the moment. But what you have to work out is, do the benefits for you personally outweigh the risks for you personally? And that is a very personal choice. So I would always say, don't let anybody tell you, your friends or anybody else, whatever they are doing, whatever their toolkit is, that's great. That works for them. But as an individual, you have got to work out what is in your toolkit for you personally and what's going to work for you personally. And therefore, your toolkit may look very different to somebody else's. As I say, the nutrition lifestyle is always there. That's got to be there for everybody as your starting point. But there will be other things that fit within that toolkit for you. Your dosage may be different to someone else. And that's the other thing just to bear in mind for everybody, is the fact that it's not a case of just trying it one day and you wake up the next day feeling amazing, and I'm saying this to men as well. Don't think that just because your partner suddenly got HRT, they are going to turn into an angel overnight. Life's going to get back to how it was
all the
before.
problems, is it? No, it really doesn't. No.
And so it is a bit of a trial and error. You may need to try different formulations. You may need to try different dosage, for example. It may take a little while before you see any relief from it. But, that's for a conversation for you and a medical professional, your GP. I'm just saying that to highlight the fact that don't be scared of those conversations, and remember that this is your health, it's your body, it's your life. You really need to work out what's going to work for you personally. And so there is a lot on social media. There seems to be this whole kind of divide between, oh, you've got to go through it naturally. Oh my God, no, if you don't have HRT, you're going to end up with Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, you're going to die of a heart attack. None of that is true. Your own individual risk factors may determine some of that. If you have a family history of certain things like osteoporosis, you might be at greater risk. But we are all biochemically individual, and it's really important that you make a plan that works for you personally and not be guided or persuaded by anybody else that's kind of out there trying to tell you, oh, stay off the HRT, or you must take HRT, or whatever it may be. So I just want to make that clear for everybody. And that's where the education is really, really important for everybody within an organisation.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice we can give, is symptom trackers. Definitely use them. Be aware that your journey is completely and utterly individual, and educate yourself. 3 really, really clear points that I would say to everybody as part of a menopause journey for any individual, whether it's the actual person going through the menopause or whether it's a family.
If anyone is interested in getting more support, whether that be for a health condition or for perimenopause and menopause, I do run group programs. My Empowered Menopause group program, I've just about to start one, but we will be running again in the new year. Then you can get in touch with me. Or if you think you need more one-to-one personalized support, or if you're an organisation that wants training for everybody within the organisation to understand better about menopause and perimenopause, or if you want some health and wellbeing general talks as well, then you can find me at www.GingerGreenNutrition.co.uk. I'm also on social media channels as well, so do come and say hi.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nat.